Hello, welcome to The Wandering Drew. I am Drew. On today's episode, I'd like to do a recap of the Ocean to Lake Trail, or what I keep calling the Swamp to Shore Trail, and recap not only this trail itself, but my performance on it as it relates to me personally and my gear. Stay tuned. Welcome back. So if you've been watching my videos for the last several weeks, you watched me along with 4 others, Stephen, AJ, Joe, and Matthew, hike the Ocean to Lake Trail. And this hike took place over 4 days in February 2020. I had been planning to go on this trail for about 9 or 10 months, ever since I first learned of this trail. This trail really called to me. It's unlike any trail that I've ever hiked on. And I've done some hiking, and sometimes you might have to cross a stream or a creek or actually even a river, but never have I had to trudge through flooded areas like this for, long distances, maybe a mile even at once, up to your thighs or your knees. Fortunately, we planned out not knowing how the weather was going to be, and we ended up hiking in February, which is the dry season in Florida, which is when most people use this trail. It's generally used from December through about March. Even after that, the heat becomes oppressive, and also you usually have rain, which brings more flooding. And parts of the trail are actually very hard to get through or unusable. So we just happened to plan out a week that was pretty good. It had been dry, hadn't rained too much in the previous couple of weeks. So the trail was more or less dry compared to what it might be, say, during the summer or in the rainy season. But there were still a lot of portions that were flooded, and you have to go through water. So most of the time the water was actually up to our, ankles, maybe up to your calf, but not higher than that. And several portions were knee higher or even, a little bit higher than that toward your thighs, but it didn't get any higher than that. And I have heard and read journals and other stories of other hikers where they had to wade into water that was hip high. Due to that year there had been a rainstorm or just bad timing on their part. So you get what you get, and you guess you don't get upset. But we were very fortunate in the fact that while it was wet, it wasn't that bad. And I gotta say, in some ways, it was actually quite fun to do that. It's something that I don't normally do, and definitely was out of character for me. Now, when I first started planning to hike this trail, it was going to be solo. I didn't plan on going with anyone. I was just going to go myself. And then one of my sons showed interest and had then mentioned bringing a friend along. So the composition of what was going to take place in terms of who was going hiking changed several times during the planning process. So at one point we actually grew to a group of about 9 people. And obviously you saw the crew that I ended up with at the end. And it worked out good that way. I think that it would have been pretty challenging to do this hike solo. I think I would have done it, and it would have been a totally different hike. But I think it was actually a little bit more enjoyable and fun. Of course, I enjoyed having my son there. But it was enjoyable to go hiking with other people and to meet them. And I really enjoyed meeting AJ and Joe, who I had never met prior to going hiking with them. So all in all, it was a good experience. And I'm glad that I did do it that way, because I think being solo would have been a little bit more challenging. The Ocean to Lake Trail is a great trail. It's challenging, and it's difficult, but it's not impossible. You just have to go there with, I think, a good attitude and be prepared for what you're going to encounter. Realize that you're going to step into mud, you're going to step into wet areas, and be prepared for that. I can only say that when we hiked, it seemed like trail maintenance had either just been completed pretty recently, which I know that they do a lot of their trail maintenance in November, December. in that part of the state, and the trail was well marked, well blazed. Only a couple of spots did you even have to really think about which way to go. It was that easy to follow the blazes, and I think it could be quite easily done just by doing that. However, I would always recommend that you have some sort of backup plan for navigation besides just following the blazes. A map is highly recommended always when you hike. And in my case, I also not only had a map, but I also had a electronic application that I used on my phone, the Guthook app, which has a map of this trail. And I would really recommend that to most people, especially if you're not good at navigation or map reading, which most people are not. The app tells you pretty clearly, if you look at it, if you've gone off the trail, because you know you're not on the line anymore and you've gone away from it. And it's pretty intuitive to get you back. And it has all the things you really need: the major sites, points of interest, campgrounds, water sources. So for the application, the Guthook app of the Ocean to Lake Trail, I would highly recommend it. I think it was $2.99. I mean, you really don't get much cheaper than that. It's less than a price of coffee at Starbucks, but you know, you're going to use it if you're hiking. And I think it's a great resource for anyone to have as a backup for navigation. Of course, I still bring a paper map because you never know, your phone could get in the swamp and get wet or not work, run out of power. Anything's possible, and you want to have a plan B. So I've already pretty much talked a little about the trail, how wet it was and muddy in certain spots. But to me, day 1, 2, and 3 were really fun, or more fun, I should say, than day 4. Day 1, we were mostly dry the whole day and some muddy spots until we came to the last 1.5 miles, 2 miles. And then we had to get wet, which I wasn't too happy about, especially right before you get to camp. So your shoes are wet, but I was lucky to dry them out. But on day 2, you went right back in the swamp again. And we spent most of the day in and out of water on day 2. And day 3 was pretty much like day 1. It was, I think it was pretty dry. Intermittently, it was wet, but it really got wet toward the end. I think the last 1 mile to 1.5 miles right before camp, you're pretty much in the water the whole mile or close to it to get there. And there were a couple of boardwalks as well, as I remember. But it was still a good day, and that was a shorter day for us, so it didn't seem as bad. Day 4 was just really long, the 20 miles. There were a lot of dry, open areas with stretches with no shade, and water was a little bit more scarce. And I probably didn't plan properly for that. I missed a couple opportunities where I should have probably filled up some of my water bottles and filtered some water, and I didn't do that. And I think I paid for that toward the end. Myself, AJ, I think most of the people, we were all very low on water because we had skipped like a creek or something where we probably had an opportunity to get water, and we just didn't take it. We didn't realize, or poor planning really on our part. So I'm going to have to take responsibility for that and say that was probably my fault for running low on water. That should never have happened. But it was my error, and it worked out okay. Nobody got hurt, no one got sick, no one got injured, and there was no harm done long term. The only thing I would do if I would rehike this again, and I think I would, I actually like the trail, I think I would rehike it. I like day 1 and 2, like I said, I think those are the most fun for me. I would probably do those sections again, but if I was to do the whole trail again, I would change very little. Originally, as I mentioned, I wanted to do this as a 5-day hike, and I think I had a good plan there. I would have done a stop off in Jonathan Dickinson at one of the campsites, probably Kitchen Creek. Although they're pretty primitive, I don't remember seeing any shade in those areas at all. So it would have been pretty hot, but it would have broke up that mileage of that 21 mile day to a more manageable area. And I could have altered some of my other days probably a little bit, but not by much. There's not enough campsites to give you a lot of variety in how you do this without sacrificing one day for a short day and one day for a long day. But it can be done. You can work it out. I might even do like day 1 or 2 again, like as loops. I probably would have gone longer on day 1, but I really liked the Powerline camp. I thought it was a nice campsite with the canal right next to it, so you had water. You could fish if you wanted to, and it was just a nice trail to do. And I actually have contemplated, at least sometimes in the winter when you can't hike other places, you can come to South Florida and hike because the weather is good. So it's an option for winter hiking. As I said, I really didn't like day 4 very much because there was a lot of open areas with scrub and prairie, and then toward the end it was sand with just a hot air mass. Even when there was a breeze, it was like being in an oven. It was just really oppressive. I didn't like that much without much shade. But the other areas, there's shade intermittently. You're going in and out of the water. The water is actually cold and cool on your feet, and it feels good while you're hiking it. You don't appreciate sometimes getting wet, but it does cool your feet off and make them feel good. Before I had done this hike, I would have said, that's crazy to be walking in, an open marshy area or a swampy area. You have no idea what's in there, if there's an alligator there or not, or snakes. Kind of, once you start doing it, you kind of just get into it and you just do it. And by the end, I kind of took note how odd it was. In the beginning, we were trying to keep our feet dry, and if mud would come, we would look for a way to get around it or carefully step. And pretty much by day 2, after the first hour or 2 of trudging through the mud, when you came to a wet spot, most of the time, we just walked right down the middle of the trail the way you're supposed to, and didn't even worry about the mud and the water anymore, because it didn't matter. You were wet and you were muddy. And it's just, that's what you got to do. So you just did it. And it seemed kind of strange to me. There was 1 or 2 places where we came to a large open lake area, and one of them you walk across the lake and you're thinking, there's got to be a gator in here somewhere. He's just got to be. And you're splashing and trudging, and I'm thinking, if I was a gator and I sensed all this commotion going in the water, I'd probably come to see what it is. I'm thinking maybe some animal got trapped and I could come eat and get me a free meal. And I'm thinking, I'm the free meal, as I'm walking through this water. It just seemed so insane how quickly you adapt to, this is the norm, and I'm going to walk through an area that I know there's gators. And we didn't really see a lot of snakes in the water, no water moccasins or anything. We saw the one snake that Stephen saw and a couple of racers. But, you would hear something in some of the bushes sometimes, but you're not sure what it is. But it just was surprising how quickly you become adapted and accept the fact that you're going to trudge through a potentially riskier, hazardous situation. But I enjoyed the fact that I got to see a part of Florida that very few people, that come down here get to see. People come down and they see the populated areas and the beaches, but how many people, even if they go to the Everglades, they stop at the edge of the road and they look out over the Everglades, or they go on maybe a tour, but they don't get to see the areas and walk through them like us hikers do. So that was unique. And I really got to say I enjoyed it. Okay, so enough of the trail and the water and all that, and let's get down to how I did performance-wise and gear-wise. I am always reevaluating my equipment. I decide whether it worked for me or didn't work for me, if it makes it into my pack or it gets to stay home in the future. And this trip was no different. And there are a couple of changes I would probably make. This trip was unique in that the environment and the weather are very different than some of the other hikes I've been on. So obviously during the winter you're going to have different clothes, different equipment than a summer hike. But I still had some problems with some equipment and some changes I would probably make. First, I'm going to talk about myself. Now, obviously, I always feel that I could be in better shape. I could always drop a little weight, but I think I did pretty well. I had no problem hiking this distance, no problem carrying my pack or my equipment. First, there's my performance. I think I did well on this hike. I had no problem walking the distances that I had planned and obviously finishing the hike. Fortunately, I had done most of the planning and the research prior to any of the other people that you saw hiking became involved. As I mentioned before, I had planned on doing this as a solo hike. So I had already done all the research, purchased the maps, and done my planning on what I was going to do, when I was going to go, and how I was going to do it. The only thing that the other people coming with me changed was my time period. We went a week or 2 later to accommodate the other people, and the only request that they had was that we do it in 4 days. I had originally planned on 5 days. That was not a deal breaker for me. And when you hike with other people, it's a give and take. It's not all about, it's not necessarily just my hike, it's our hike. And we're a team and a group. And you have to sometimes make compromises. And going from 5 days to 4 days was one of the things that I basically compromised. And I didn't have a problem with that. The mileage was not a problem for me. And I didn't see an issue with accommodating that request. So that's what we did. Thank you for watching this video. If you like what I'm doing on this channel and you like the videos, please consider giving me a like, click the thumbs up. Please consider subscribing and leaving a comment below. Really appreciate the comments. Once again, as I joke around, it lets me know that someone is actually out there watching. Thank you for taking time out of your day to watch the video. I hope you will come back next week. Till we meet again.